Not a great way to start the day. I forgot my feijoa smoothie and the GPS isn't working, but I'm sure we'll make the most of it and can work around those two things. The weather wasn't too bad, but it was going to get up later in the afternoon. We got out to our desired spot, found some nice shelter, and we're into it. Visibility doesn't look too bad, maybe like 8-10 meters. The camera always makes it look a little bit better than what it is. I'm going to head out to a weed edge, but I'm just going to scoot through the shallows first up. Right next to the boat, stumbled across this snapper just resting up. Perfect kill shot. As soon as we start coming into winter, I tend to use a smaller gun. I've gone down to my 100 Wettie Reef Pro carbon gun. A little bit shorter, more maneuverable, and I'm going to shoot a lot more small fish. As I always reinforce in all the videos, look after your fish. As soon as I shoot them, I start prepping them for how I want to eat them. Always make sure I bleed them first and gut and gill them to keep everything tidy, as I don't want my fish lying in all their guts, juices and whatnot. I can't quite get to the bottom here because my float line's only short, but I'm just diving down to inspect what's happening. Could see a few bait fish on the way down, but there wasn't a huge amount going on. There's some koharu that have swum past, so I'm just going to take one of those to make sure we've got some sashimi or raw fish for dinner. Same as the snapper, gut and gill it, make sure I bleed it, especially for raw fish. It will make them taste a lot better. Into my Wettie mini float boat to keep all the fish out of the water. I've headed further up current. You can see there's a big congregation of demoiselles, an obvious spot to make a dive, especially being at the front of this little bit of reef sitting out on the sand. Here we're diving down to maybe 16 to 18 meters, something like that. On the way down, always look around so you can figure out where you want to be positioned on the bottom. And especially in a spot like this, there could be a John Dory sitting somewhere. I'm going to play a little bit of cat and mouse. I'm just showing myself a little bit out on the sand, but also tucking in a little bit behind the weed, and all these demoiselles will cover me up. This works great for attracting fish to come in, as they can't see exactly what you are, but it can be a bit of a hindrance because it's difficult to see through all these demoiselles. You see, I move my head quite a bit, but it's because I can't see through them so well, and a fish could approach me from any direction, as this is my first dive in the spot. Much to my surprise, there's actually some snapper that come racing into me. So I don't muck around and just take a quick shot before it spooks. This doesn't always happen on weed edges, but there's obviously a school of snappers sitting out in front there. Due to the demoiselles covering around me, obviously the snapper couldn't see me quite perfectly. Sophie does a dive and she has the exact same thing. Dives down to the bottom and the snapper swam straight up to her.
There was like 20 billion of them.
Sounded like there was a good school that came in. We're really happy with the start. We've already got 3 nice snapper and a koharu. Big clouds of demoiselles. There's a few pori here too on the way down. It looked like a really nice spot to dive. It's interesting, I've got a new GoPro and you can see that the colour changes a bit on the bottom. Must have something to do with the settings on the GoPro. It sort of bounces in trying to bring out the blue in the water and then goes back to being a greeny tinge. I'm sure I just need to muck around with the settings a bit more. All while this was happening, there was a bit of bad weather rolling in. You see the clouds rolling over the top of the hills there. Back in the shallows, I spied a mob of snapper swim around, took a long shot on the small snapper. I knew it was a reasonably long shot for my small gun, so I chased after it into the weed, so I didn't want to put too much pressure on it. Turns out the spear went all the way through. If you're unsure of your shot, play your fish carefully. Same again, gut and gill my fish. So important, it's going to make a massive difference to the eating quality of your fish if you look after them. There's still a few snapper cruising around watching me while I shot that snapper, so I grabbed a few kinner, broke them up and threw them into this little bowl amongst the kelp. Swam away for 5 minutes and came back. I'm not entirely sure where the snapper are going to be, because I did throw the kinner and they dispersed a little bit before they hit the bottom. See, there's a little bit of commotion from small snapper swim around, so that they must be feeding on it here somewhere. Taking my time, keeping my cover. I don't want to give them away my position too quickly. As I'm getting to the end of my breath hold, I'm going to pop up and have a wider view and see if there's snapper where I didn't think they'd be. And there's one right there. So take a quick shot. This is the importance of having a nice maneuverable gun, and that's why I use a shorter gun, especially in winter time. Although not a perfect shot, I was able to maneuver this small gun into position really easy. As well as it being carbon fibre makes a massive difference. Driven down the coast a little bit, let Sophie swim to the boat. I'm just going to jump in and look for some crays and maybe some other bits and pieces. I think we've got enough snapper. Interesting to see little different species. Here's a lizard fish. I'm not sure if there's a few subspecies of them, but they're not commonly seen, but here's one sitting on the sand. It gets really annoyed with me swimming too close to it, as it's obviously just waiting for a small fish to come past so it can launch out at it. Decide not to disturb it too much and just leave it alone. I've spied a nice looking sort of underhang here, a good spot to probably find some crayfish. On the way in, I actually spotted there's a scorpion, a big scorpion fish sitting right there. They're good to eat. It's always nice to mix up your bag with different species, so I'm not just eating the same fish all the time. I've got my torch as well, which makes a big difference, and I didn't notice there's actually a whole heap of crays at the back of the hole there, but they're all quite small, so I'll leave them. The flesh is a lot like crayfish in texture and both taste. And as mentioned, it is nice to have different species to eat each week. I do eat a lot of fish, eating fish probably 4 or 5 nights a week. So it is nice to have something different. Just the same as the other fish, I bleed it to get all the blood out of it. You've got to be careful of these things as they have poisonous spines all over them. So see what I do to get them off my spear. Rather than muck around and get too forceful, push the spear all the way in. I engage it in my mechanism so I don't lose my spear. Then I've got a pigtail swivel here on the ends of my reel setup. I can undo that and pull the line backwards through the fish. Then it doesn't require too much force and I don't risk stabbing myself from one of the spines in the fish. I'll connect that back up to my spear, and it was easy to get the fish off without being too difficult. I dropped my gun and unloaded it and had a look in this area for some crayfish. I've spotted this one at the back of the hole here. Doesn't have anywhere to go, so even with my poor crayfish technique, I do manage to get hold of it. I'm just taking my time to readjust and get a good hold on its horns, not its feelers, and wiggle it free. If a crayfish jams itself, you don't want to just pull really hard, push backwards, forwards, and you'll disorientate it and it will eventually let go and you'll get it out. So now we've got a crayfish on the board as well. Spy another good looking spot, some bigger boulders in an area that's just had small boulders, and often the crayfish will congregate in these sort of spots. So again, I anchor my gun with my drop weight down into this hole. It's quite an awkward hole to get into, and you can't quite see it. You'll see it when I grab it, you'll see its feelers there. And same again, I actually whacked my hand on a rock on the way in, so my grip's not fantastic. So I'm readjusting my grip so I've got a good hold on it, rather than pull its feelers off. And same again, jiggle it around backwards and forwards, forwards. You don't have to be too strong pulling it out, you just need to disorientate them to get them to release their legs. This is a slightly bigger one. I checked the size to make sure it's not too soft, as this time of year you will get soft crays. 2 crays is enough for me and Sophie for the day, so I'm headed back to the boat. We've only been in the water for 2 or 3 hours and we've got a really nice catch. When getting in the boat, I always make sure I put my mask and snorkel in my fin pockets, as well as my gloves. Keep all my gear together so when I get back in the water or leave the boat, I don't leave anything behind. Constantly people put masks and snorkels in the side gunnels of the boats, the weight belt bin. It gets stood on and gets broken, it won't get broken there. Got my scorpion fish and a couple of crayfish.
Hold it up to the camera. Was it sitting underneath the boat?
And this is why it pays to check under the boat.
Nice work.
We've got enough for the day, so we're going to head back in. Another good successful winter dive.